All right, diving in today, folks, we're tackling outliers. Those individuals who achieve crazy, remarkable success.
Fascinating topic indeed.
Often the immediate thought is, oh, they're just super talented or must worked harder than everyone else.
hmm
But the research you sent over suggests there's way more to it than that. A lot more going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely. We'll be looking at a range of sources, especially, of course, Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers.
Right, Gladwell. Makes you really question that whole individualistic perspective on success, doesn't it?
Challenges some deeply held assumptions, that's for sure, with compelling arguments and fascinating examples.
So our mission today is to sort of uncover those hidden advantages, those special opportunities, and even the cultural legacies that play such a big role in shaping those exceptional achievements. Basically going beyond just talent and hard work.
Precisely. Looking at the broader context, the often overlooked factors that influence success.
Exactly. It's like a whole ecosystem, really. And to kick things off, let's jump into a bit of a health puzzle.
Intriguing starting point. Let's consider Roseto, a town with, well, a rather unique health profile.
Roseto Valfrittore, right? An Italian village, a bunch of the residents moved to Pennsylvania. And back in the 1950s, Dr. Stuart Wolf, he was studying the community, and he stumbled on something pretty surprising.
Heart attacks were a massive concern back then, a leading cause of death in America. But in Roseto,
Yeah, shockingly low rates of heart disease, like way lower than the surrounding areas.
it was quite remarkable. Naturally, researchers initially looked at the usual suspects: diet, exercise habits, maybe something genetic, even their environment in Pennsylvania.
Makes sense. You'd think that would be it. But when they compared Roseto to nearby towns like Nazareth and Bangor, similar demographics, they ruled those factors out.
Not the primary cause. The key insight, it turned out, was that Roseto's remarkable health wasn't, well, biological. It was rooted in something else entirely. Their social structure,
Their community.
precisely. This Pisani culture, as it's called, that they brought over from Italy. Close-knit families, constant social interaction, loads of civic organizations, an egalitarian spirit. Huge respect for their elders.
So it was this tight-knit community, that support network, that acted as a buffer against the stresses of modern life,
Right.
leading to these incredible health outcomes.
They were an outlier, in a sense, in terms of how we typically understand health and well-being, really emphasizes the profound impact our environment and community have on our lives.
Absolutely. Fascinating stuff. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's head over to the world of sports, specifically the Matthew effect in Canadian Major Junior hockey.
Ah, yes. A fascinating example of how, even in a system seemingly based on merit, hidden advantages can emerge. This league is generally considered a meritocracy, right? Skill and hard work should, in theory, determine who rises to the top.
Right. But then comes researcher Roger Barnsley, and he spots this bizarre pattern.
He noticed a disproportionate number of elite hockey players were born in the first few months of the year, January, February, March.
Really? Just because of their birth month?
It seems arbitrary, I know, but look at the rosters of teams like the Medicine Hat Tigers or the Vancouver Giants. You'll see that clustering. Statistical analysis across top hockey leagues confirms this trend.
Wow. So what's the explanation for this birth month bias?
It boils down to how youth sports leagues are structured. Kids born earlier in the year are, even if just by a few months, physically more mature, more developed than their peers born later in the same year.
So they have a bit of a head start.
Exactly. And that seemingly small advantage leads to better coaching, more opportunities to play, and ultimately a self-reinforcing cycle of achievement.
Makes sense. They're bigger, faster, stronger. They get picked first, get more ice time, more attention from coaches, and that advantage just snowballs over time.
It highlights how a factor as random as birth date can create hidden advantages and significantly impact a person's trajectory, even in a field that prides itself on meritocracy. And it's not just hockey. We see similar patterns in Czech junior hockey and even in soccer.
Wow. It makes you think about the implications beyond sports. You mentioned education earlier.
Precisely. Younger children within the same grade can face persistent disadvantages throughout their schooling due to those same maturity disparities. It raises questions about how we structure these systems.
Yeah, could we create age-based cohorts in sports or even in classrooms?
It's certainly possible, but there often seems to be a strong societal resistance to changing these systems. That deep-rooted belief in individual merit as the sole determinant of success is hard to shake.
I guess it makes people uncomfortable to acknowledge that factors beyond our control can have such a big influence. But okay, let's move on to another crucial aspect of success. The idea of the 10,000-hour rule. This one comes from K. Anders Ericsson's research.
This is where practice truly comes into play. Ericsson's study, conducted at Berlin's Academy of Music, focused on violinists. He wanted to understand what separated the best from the good and the average.
So were the top performers just naturally gifted?
Interestingly, no. The primary differentiating factor wasn't inherent talent. It was the sheer amount of time they dedicated to deliberate practice.
So how much practice are we talking about here?
The top violinists had consistently put in significantly more hours than their less accomplished peers, accumulating around 10,000 hours of focused practice. And this wasn't just mindless repetition, it was deliberate, focused practice aimed at improving specific skills.
10,000 hours. That's a lot of dedication. And they found no natural prodigies who excelled with minimal practice.
None whatsoever, nor did they find any grinds, people who worked tirelessly but lacked the aptitude to reach the very top. Mastery, it seems, requires that immense investment of time and effort.
Makes you think of those stories of incredibly successful individuals who, had a ton of practice under their belt early on, like Bill Joy. He had all that early access to computers at the University of Michigan, right?
Exactly, a fortunate circumstance that allowed him to put in those crucial hours. And then there's Bill Gates. He benefited from extraordinary opportunities to rack up programming hours during high school.
Oh yeah, with that progressive school, Lakeside. Then all those lucky breaks that gave him access to even more computer time.
Lakeside, C cubed, ISI, even sneaking onto the University of Washington's computers. He was practically living and breathing code, and it all added up.
And you can't forget about the Beatles and their crazy schedule of performances in Hamburg. That's another classic example of an apprenticeship through sheer volume of practice.
They honed their musical skills and stage presence through endless hours of performing. Really highlights how crucial those opportunities for intense, focused practice are.
The chance to put in those 10,000 hours, it makes a huge difference. All right, moving on. Let's delve into the computer revolution and the interesting patterns we see with the birth years of some key players.
This is where timing, being in the right place at the right time, becomes a major factor.
Right, so we're talking about people like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Eric Schmidt, and those who started Sun Microsystems, right? Bill Joy again, Scott McNealy, Vinod Khosla, Andy Bechtolsheim. It's like a who's who of the tech world.
And when you look at their birth dates, there's a striking concentration in the mid-1950s.
Mid-1950s. So what's so special about that particular time frame?
Well, they were essentially the perfect age as personal computing took off.
They caught the wave at just the right moment.
Precisely. They were able to ride that wave, get in on the ground floor, so to speak. Not like those who were, say, a decade or two older and already established in the mainframe era. They were sort of locked into that older technology.
Like Nathan Myhrvold explained, they missed the boat.
Right. And then you have someone like Steve Jobs, growing up in Silicon Valley, immersed in that emerging tech culture from a young age. That environment, that exposure, played a huge role.
So timing and location, those seemingly random factors, can be incredibly advantageous. It's not just about individual brilliance.
Often overlooked, but hugely significant. And this ties into our next topic, the whole notion of genius. We tend to think of high IQ as a guarantee for success. But is it really?
Well, you brought up Chris Langan, who has an extraordinarily high IQ. And his story is, well, it's complicated.
It challenges the simple equation of IQ equals success. And there's also Lewis Terman's famous study of the termites, a group of highly gifted children he followed for decades. They were expected to achieve amazing things.
And how did they turn out?
Interestingly, while some did well, very few became national figures, and none won a Nobel Prize.
Not a single Nobel Prize winner. Wow.
Terman's team even missed identifying future Nobel laureates William Shockley and Luis Alvarez because their IQ scores didn't meet his criteria. It's a bit ironic. And when you look at recent Nobel laureates in medicine, they come from a variety of undergraduate institutions, not just the most elite schools.
So maybe going to Harvard doesn't guarantee you a Nobel Prize.
Not necessarily. It suggests there's more to success than just raw intelligence. And psychologist Barry Schwartz even argues that for top-tier universities, once applicants are above a certain intelligence threshold, a lottery system might work just as well.
A lottery, that's a bold statement.
He believes that beyond a certain point, everyone's smart enough. And Liam Hudson's work on convergent versus divergent thinking further supports this idea. He found that people with high IQs often excel at convergent thinking, finding the single best answer. But they may not be as good at divergent thinking, which is about creativity, generating multiple solutions.
So maybe IQ tests aren't capturing the full picture of what it takes to succeed in the real world.
Precisely. This brings us to the concept of practical intelligence, a term coined by Robert Sternberg. It's the ability to get things done, to navigate social situations effectively, what some might call street smarts.
It's knowing how to work the system, how to play the game.
Exactly. And it contrasts with that analytical intelligence measured by IQ tests. And the contrasting life trajectories of Chris Langan, who struggled despite his high IQ, and Robert Oppenheimer, who thrived in complex environments, really illustrate this difference.
Oppenheimer had both, didn't he? High IQ and that practical intelligence. He knew how to get things done and lead people.
Precisely. And sociologist Annette LaRose's research sheds light on how our upbringing can shape the development of this practical intelligence.
Right, with her concept of concerted cultivation.
Exactly. She found that middle-class families tend to practice concerted cultivation. They encourage their children to negotiate, to question authority, to develop a sense of entitlement.
Whereas working class and poor families often take a more hands-off approach. They focus on the accomplishment of natural growth.
Right. And this difference in parenting styles can have long-lasting effects on how children navigate the world. It's like that anecdote you mentioned about Alex Williams confidently interacting with his doctor.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of concerted cultivation in action. He was comfortable asking questions, advocating for himself.
And that comfort level, that sense of entitlement, can be incredibly valuable when it comes to seizing opportunities and navigating complex situations.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's move on to a case study that really challenges those traditional rags to riches narratives. The 3 lessons of Joe Flom.
This one highlights the unexpected advantages that can come from, well, seemingly disadvantaged backgrounds. Joe Flom, a highly successful lawyer, and the founders of that prestigious law firm, Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen and Katz, they all shared a similar background.
Jewish men, born in the Bronx or Brooklyn in the 1930s, children of immigrants who worked in the garment industry.
Not exactly the typical image of privilege, right?
Yeah.
And yet their background in many ways set them up for success.
So how did that happen?
Well, they faced a lot of discrimination from those established white shoe law firms, the ones with all the prestige and power.
So they couldn't get those coveted positions.
Exactly. So they ended up specializing in areas of law that weren't considered as desirable at the time. Litigation and proxy fights.
Proxy fights, what are those?
They're basically battles for control of a company. Think hostile takeovers.
Ah, okay. So they took the work that nobody else wanted. And how did that turn into an advantage?
Well, as luck would have it, the corporate takeover boom hit. And suddenly, those once undesirable skills were in high demand.
They were the experts.
Precisely. They had the experience, the knowledge, and they were ready to capitalize on that opportunity. It's a classic case of being in the right place at the right time, but also having the right skills because of those earlier disadvantages.
Wow, that's fascinating. And it's interesting how this idea of demographic luck plays out in other examples, too, like with Maurice and Morjanklo.
Right. Maurice, born in the 1910s, faced all the hardships of the Depression era. But his son, Mort, born in the 1930s, benefited from a demographic trough. Smaller class sizes, less competition for jobs. It made a huge difference in his opportunities.
So even within the same family, timing can create vastly different outcomes.
Absolutely. And you can't forget about the broader historical context. Those Jewish immigrants in New York City, they arrived with skills in garment work which perfectly align with the city's booming industry at the time.
Right, like the Borgenik family. They built a successful apron business.
Precisely. And that work in the garment industry, it wasn't just about making money. It instilled a certain work ethic, a sense of autonomy, an understanding of complex processes. It was satisfying work, and it fostered practical skills that proved valuable later on.
So their seemingly disadvantaged background actually equipped them with the skills and mindset they needed to succeed in that particular historical moment.
Exactly. It's a reminder that sometimes what appears to be a disadvantage can actually be an advantage in disguise.
Okay, shifting gears again, let's talk about a factor that might seem a bit unexpected. Culture. Specifically, the ethnic theory of plane crashes.
Now, this one delves into how deeply ingrained cultural patterns can have real-world consequences, even in highly technical fields like aviation.
Right, so we're looking at Korean Air, which had a string of plane crashes in the late 1980s and 1990s. And it turned out that many of these accidents weren't due to a lack of piloting skills.
No, they were often attributed to communication breakdowns and failures in teamwork within the cockpit.
Which is, pretty terrifying when you think about it.
Absolutely. And this contrasts sharply with Captain Ratwatt's incredible emergency landing in Helsinki, where clear, assertive communication and a willingness to deviate from protocol were crucial to saving the lives of everyone on board.
So what explains those communication breakdowns in the Korean air crashes?
Well, one theory involves Geert Hofstede's cultural dimensions, particularly the Power Distance Index, or PDI. It measures how much a society accepts hierarchical power structures.
Okay. So how does that relate to plane crashes?
Cultures with a high PDI, like Korea, often have communication patterns where subordinates are hesitant to challenge or question their superiors, even in critical situations.
So you're saying that co-pilots might have been reluctant to speak up if they noticed something was wrong.
Exactly. They might have been too deferential to the captain, even if it meant risking the safety of the flight. And this cultural factor might have contributed to the Avianca Flight 052 crash, where the pilots ran out of fuel near JFK. They failed to communicate the urgency of their situation to air traffic control.
Wow. That's a tragic example of how cultural norms can have life or death consequences.
And Robert Helmreich's analysis of the crash supports this theory. He pointed out that the co-pilot's weak, mitigated speech patterns reflected a cultural respect for authority.
He wasn't being direct enough. He wasn't emphasizing the danger they were in.
Right, and it cost them precious time. And it's interesting to see how David Greenberg, hired to improve Korean Air's safety culture, tackled this issue. He encouraged the use of English in the cockpit.
English. Why English?
Well, the idea was to create a more level playing field, a more egalitarian communication environment. By using a language that wasn't tied to their hierarchical culture, pilots might feel more comfortable speaking up.
So it's about breaking down those cultural barriers that hinder open communication.
Precisely. It's a reminder that even in highly technical fields, cultural factors can play a significant role.
All right, for our final topic today, let's explore the intriguing connection between rice paddies and math tests.
This one digs into how cultural practices and even linguistic structures can shape our aptitude for certain skills.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So we're talking about rice paddies, those flooded fields where rice is grown.
Precisely. And the contrast with Western agriculture is key here. Western farming often relies on mechanization, large land holdings, efficiency. But traditional Asian rice cultivation is very different. It demands intensive manual labor, meticulous care, and a constant effort to maximize yield from small plots of land.
So it's a much more demanding, labor-intensive process.
Absolutely. And this demanding nature of rice farming has fostered a culture of diligence, persistence, a willingness to put in sustained effort.
So you're saying that this work ethic, this cultural value placed on hard work, might translate to other areas of life, like math.
That's the theory, and it's supported by research on how number systems in different languages are structured. East Asian languages tend to have more transparent logical base 10 systems compared to the irregularities of Western languages.
Where like it's easier to learn math if your language makes more sense.
That's the idea. It reduces the cognitive load. And it might explain why Asian students often outperform their Western peers in math, despite the persistent myth of some innate Asian math ability.
Right. It's not about genetics. It's about cultural influences.
Precisely. And the structure of the school year might play a role too. Western countries have those long summer breaks, whereas East Asian countries have shorter breaks and more instructional time.
So they're spending more time learning. And that brings us to Carl Alexander's research on Baltimore public school students. He found that lower-income students learn as much or more during the school year as wealthier students.
But they fall behind significantly over the summer.
That summer learning loss is a real problem.
And it highlights the importance of providing consistent opportunities for learning. And that's where programs like KIPP, the Knowledge is Power program, come in. They've had great success in improving math schools for low-income students by implementing longer school days, year-round learning, and a culture that emphasizes effort, grit, and self-control.
It's like that anecdote about the key PP student who's been hours wrestling with a single math problem.
Yes, he was determined to figure it out, to master the concept. And that kind of persistence, that willingness to put in the time and effort, is key to success. Just like Renee, who dedicated so much time to understanding that challenging math concept.
And it's not just about the amount of time. It's about having the time to go deeper, to review, to make mistakes and learn from them.
Exactly. And that's where those extended learning opportunities can make a big difference. It changes the relationship with learning. It becomes less about pressure and more about exploration and discovery.
And it shows that success is achievable, even for those who face systemic disadvantages, if they have the opportunity and the support to put in the effort.
Right. Like Marita, with her incredibly demanding schedule at KIPP, she's sacrificing leisure time to gain an educational advantage. It's a testament to the power of dedication and opportunity.
Absolutely. Okay, for our final point today, let's journey to Jamaica and explore a fascinating family history that reveals the long reach of historical advantages. We're talking about Daisy Nation and her family.
This story takes us back to colonial Jamaica and highlights the complexities of its social structure. Daisy Nation's family history traces back to William Ford, an Irish planter, and an enslaved Igbo woman. Their union resulted in children who belonged to a colored class, a group that had certain advantages over those who were enslaved.
They were free, but they weren't white, and that placed them in a unique position within Jamaican society.
Precisely. And Daisy Nation's grandfather, John Ford, benefited from being born into this free, educated colored class. It opened doors that were closed to others.
And Daisy herself, she was incredibly ambitious, determined to provide her daughters with the best education possible, despite limited resources.
She went to great lengths to secure opportunities for her daughters, like intervening to get a scholarship for her daughter Joyce, Malcolm Gladwell's mother.
So, Joyce Gladwell's success, her path to becoming a prominent scholar, was shaped by these earlier generations. It wasn't just about her individual talent and hard work.
Exactly. It was built upon a foundation laid by her mother and those who came before her. The opportunities and cultural legacies embedded within the West Indian social structure played a crucial role.
It's a powerful reminder that success is often a multi-generational effort. All right, to wrap things up, let's recap those 10 key takeaways from our exploration of outliers.
Absolutely. Number one, Rosetto's exceptional health demonstrates the profound impact of strong social connections and a supportive community. Number two, the Matthew effect in hockey highlights how seemingly arbitrary factors like birth month can create significant, often unseen advantages. Number three, achieving mastery in any field, like those 10,000 hours for musicians, requires a significant investment of time and deliberate practice, emphasizing the crucial role of opportunity. Number four, the birth year of those tech giants highlights how timing, being in the right place at the right time, can provide a critical advantage. Number five, high IQ doesn't guarantee success. Practical intelligence and social savvy are equally vital.
And number 6, Joe Flom's story illustrates how seemingly disadvantaged backgrounds can, in the right context, become unexpected advantages. Number 7, cultural influences, like power distance, can profoundly impact communication patterns and even safety in high-stakes settings. Number 8, cultural practices like intensive rice farming and linguistic structures can shape our aptitude for certain skills, challenging the notion of innate abilities. Number 9, summer learning loss disproportionately affects lower-income students, highlighting the need for interventions like extended learning opportunities.
And finally, number 10, family history and social structures, as seen in Daisy Nation's story, create legacies of opportunity and disadvantage that shape individual success across generations.
So, as we've seen, extraordinary success is rarely a solo act. It's about a complex interplay of individual effort, hidden advantages, cultural legacies, and those lucky breaks that put us in the right place at the right time. It's about recognizing the full ecosystem of success.
Indeed. A much richer and more nuanced perspective than simply attributing success to talent and hard work alone.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what are those unseen forces that have shaped our own lives? What opportunities have we had or missed out on? What cultural legacies have we inherited? And how can we create a more equitable world where everyone has the chance to reach their full potential, regardless of their background or those seemingly random factors that can play such a big role?
It's a crucial question, and one that deserves our continued attention and exploration.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, folks. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep pushing for a world where everyone has the chance to shine.